If there were ever a virtue that Catholic men are lacking today, fundamentally, it would be this one. Could it be a result of fatherless homes, a easy, soft culture where everything is a click of a button away? Could very well be. I think there are a multitude of factors here. But nevertheless, it's not intelligence that's lacking. It's not even hope or charity that's lacking. It's fortitude, the ability to suffer well without collapsing, the ability to endure without complaining, and the ability to remain faithful when it hurts. And the reason is because we have lives engineered around comfort, food on demand, entertainment on demand, pleasure on demand. And then we wonder why we're weak in the face of temptation. You cannot build a strong soul, gentlemen, in a frictionless life. And most men today are not persecuted. We're not facing certain death. We're not facing, the enemy at the gates, although some would say that the enemies are within the gates. And I would absolutely agree. They're simply too comfortable, and then they fold. And this isn't a new insight. The saints, of course, warned us about this. So St. Thomas said that fortitude ensures firmness in difficulties and constancy in the pursuit of the good. So firmness in difficulty, constancy in the pursuit of the good. When prayer feels dry, when fasting feels uncomfortable, when your body's tired, when marriage feels heavy, and when leadership is costly, or more as it relates to people in the social media world, when the church seems to be like it's in crisis, we fold and we defect because we don't know how to suffer. Now, I think about this. Think about if you're in, I believe, what was it, the 17th or 18th century when Constantinople was sieged by Muhammad II. The absolute horrific things that happened there. If you read anything about the Crusades, and I highly recommend Rabin Ibrahim's books about this, and you heard about what our co-religionists, what our fellow Catholics went through at that time, it's enough to put the book down and incite a feeling of nausea. People being murdered, priests and nuns and churches being desecrated in the most horrific ways. Yet they remained faithful. Yet, they didn't shake their fists at God. They remained faithful to the end. They were martyrs. They were fortuitous. Now, contrast that to us now, where if our order on Uber Eats is late, we lose our minds. If our showers are a little bit colder, we buckle under that pressure. When a lustful thought comes in, we water that thought with our wills and our intellects, and then eventually what happens? We fall into lust, we fall into temptation, and it goes on and on and on. When there's something that happens in the church, we think about apostatizing. It's just a sign of weakness, a sign of the lack of fortitude and the inability to remain constant. And what are the sub-virtues of fortitude? So we have endurance, we have perseverance, we have mortification, we have longanimity, we have equanimity, so like maintaining your calmness under duress. And if you really dissect, there's 64 total virtues. So we've got the main 5 cardinal virtues: temperance, justice, fortitude, prudence, and temperance. And underneath those, downstream from those, there are many other virtues. And we're not even well-versed. We don't know what our defects are, so we don't know how to militate against those defects. And we oftentimes don't even know what we're strong at. But I can tell you, in the work that I've done and in the life that I've lived, even to a degree now, I'm not pretending that I have this all figured out myself, because I most certainly don't. I'm further along the way compared to a lot of men, sure. This is why I'm doing the work that I do. But there's an element of myself because of this work that I'm constantly looking at myself more closely. And so, and fortitude, what it's not is, we're not talking about stoicism. That was condemned by the church. We're not stoics. It's not aggression. It's not emotional numbness. It's just a steady endurance. It's spiritual stamina. Okay. And so these areas are the areas that men lack fortitude in the most. Okay. So fasting, we can't miss a meal. We can't, guys are using electrolytes when they're doing 24-hour fasts. It's like, come on, dude. Silence. We can't sit without stimulation. This one in particular is difficult for me, but since I've started doing mental prayer and spending that 10, 15 minutes a day in mental prayer, and the ability to stay constant and my ability to cooperate with grace has increased tenfold. Chastity, we fold under pressure. Fitness, we quit when it's uncomfortable. That there's an element of mortification there. Marriage, we withdraw instead of endure. And then prayer, we stop when it feels dry. It's like it's all about feelings. The saints never cared about feelings when it came to prayer. The saints never cared about feelings when it came to fasting. They knew these things were essential. They knew to be a Catholic, to become a saint means to have tremendous amounts of virtue, but tremendous amounts of fortitude. And I look at, so if prudence is the ruler's virtue, knowing the means by which to achieve the desired end, then fortitude, the ability to suffer well, is the warrior's virtue. It's in a way the guardian of the other virtues as well. Because if you can't suffer well, I mean, how can you properly be prudent? Because you don't have any equanimity. You don't know how to maintain your calmness under duress. How do you know how to be tempered in the face of, temptation? Of course, how can you properly apply justice? If you really think about all the virtues, I mean, obviously they're all closely linked together. And so a man who cannot endure boredom cannot endure temptation. We have trained ourselves to escape discomfort instead of to endure it and to go through that wall. And so modern discomfort fundamentally is dismantling men. Okay, so everything removes, there's no friction in our lives. Instant dopamine, endless scrolling, immediate food, immediate validation. There's no waiting, no hunger, no silence, no hardship. You have trained your nervous system to panic at discomfort, and then you're surprised when you can't carry responsibility. Comfort is not neutral. It is forming you, and it's forming your soul. And of course, there are many reasons as to why men lack fortitude. It's not just the endless consumption that we see in the world today. At every angle, we're being tempted. At every angle, there's another opportunity for convenience. And comfort is bondage for the soul. It's not balance, it's bondage. We don't need motivation. We need mortification. Our formation comes through scrolling and being on Twitter instead of looking and closely examining not just our consciences, but our interiority, our interior lives, our spiritual lives, how we're conducting ourselves as Catholic men. Even men, even just giving thought to the future, men are doomer spiraling and black pilling over marriage. And that's not without, a just line of reasoning to a degree. But in a lack of fortitude, it is so easy to violate and to sin against hope. That's a sin. Despair is a sin. We're sinning directly against hope because our focus is so much on the temporal and not enough on the eternal. So guys are opting out of marriage. Guys are opting out of, all sorts of things, and or even leaving the faith altogether because of perceived scandal in the church. Understanding that this is scriptural. A lot of what we're seeing is apocalyptic. The geopolitical situation is very tense. There's a lot of stuff going on. And it's meant to drive you away from the cross and into despair because that's where the enemy wants you. And so don't take this as me trying to shame you or me trying to think that I'm better than you, because I think, everybody that understands where I've come from knows that I spent more of my life enslaved to sin, with a lack of fortitude, a lack of virtue in general, with a darkened intellect, darkened will, than I have now by the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and his precious blood being poured over and spilled over on me, coming back to the faith. But nevertheless, the point still remains. And instead of more cushy, soft, beige Catholicism, Catholic ink type of content that's centered around apologetics or stuff that makes you feel good, I want to be that brother that grabs you by the scruff of the shirt and saying, like, dude, remember whose image and likeness you were made out of or made in. Okay. It's not enough to just wear the crucifix. You've got to embrace and live the crucifix. Okay. So now let's get to the tactical, because I don't just like pontificating philosophically and waxing poetic about this stuff. How is fortitude built? Okay. It's not just prayed into existence, although that is important. It is trained. You choose small suffering. This is why, one of the greatest saints, okay, and this is at first coming into the Catholic Church, I was like, no, she's this little woman. No. Saint Therese of Lisieux, okay, the little way, offering up these little sufferings up to God, not grumbling about it. So for me, I'll give you an example to kind of humiliate myself, to, bring myself off of, if you think I'm on a pulpit right now. My children bathe before me, and there's been times where, the hot water runs out. We don't have a a tankless water heater. Maybe that's something in the future, but nevertheless, and the water's cold, or the water's a little tepid. And there's been times I found myself grumbling under my breath. And how weak and soft and effeminate is that? It's like, oh, this water is so cold. It's so uncomfortable. Because I'm so used to making my shower like a spa. How many of you can relate to this? But instead, what I'm really trying to take is a page out of St. Teresa of Lisieux's book, The Little Way. Just endure this little bit of suffering. It's not really suffering, but endure this little bit of inconvenience and offer it up to the Lord. Okay. So choosing small suffering so you don't collapse under big suffering. So you build it through hard training, structured fasting, digital restraint, early rising, finishing when you start, and prayer when it feels dry. If you cannot endure hunger, silence, fatigue, or discomfort, how will you endure loss? How will you endure illness? How will you endure failure or persecution? Fortitude is survival for Christian men. And this is not something that is optional, guys. Train your bodies so you can subdue your flesh, so you can subordinate those lower appetites and instincts to your higher faculties, your intellect and your will. So, training, even if it's calisthenics, I would obviously recommend structured progressive overload with a barbell. This is not just about muscles, guys. It's about the discipline that it trains. Fast according to your state in life, of course. Like if you've got health issues or you're pregnant, breastfeeding, etc. Obviously if you're a woman, but for the men specifically, sometimes that it doesn't always call for, but fasting doesn't always have to necessarily mean a deprivation of food. It could be a social media fast. It could be, fasting from snacking between meals or not eating out, etc. Little consistent and deliberate acts of self-denial is how sainthood is really built. It's not built in these like giant battles, right? It's built in the small wins. Think about how many small concessions you make to yourself on a daily basis and militate against those. Digital restraint. So really having control over social media, looking at your screen time and really doing a conscious audit of that, because it's subduing your soul in many ways. Not hitting the snooze button and just getting up out of bed and offering that up to the Lord when you're tired, you're grumbling, praying and enduring through prayer when it feels dry, and having some order in your life where you're praying at set times, you're doing set vocal prayers, you're meditating on the readings, where you're breathing and praying with the liturgical calendar of the church, which is so impactful. You're reading scripture, you're going to confession every other week or every week, on the same day, same time. And so you're militating against weakness consistently. And this is why bodily training is so important, because if there's one thing that I've taken away from bodily training is that a lot of training seasons are rather unproductive and they're hard. But by showing up and consistently doing it, I've been able to properly apply justice with regard to my prayer life. So meaning rendering to God what he's owed. That's my time and my devotion, regardless of what I get from it. Because just like training, prayer is 85% of it's going to be dry, status quo, going through the motions. 10% is going to be incredible. You're going to get the consolations, and then 10% is just going to be just bad. But that's part of it. This is what we signed up for. Being a Catholic doesn't mean you just get the t-shirt. That means you're an enlisted, ranked, knighted soldier for Christ. Okay? And to hammer home the point here even further is that in choosing difficulty, and I've said this before, in choosing difficulty, when difficulty chooses you, you're able to endure. So I was speaking to Dr. Dan Schneider, and he was saying he was learning how to fall. He was, judo. He's learning judo. And for many of the months doing judo, you're learning how to fall properly. And so he was out on an elk hunt, and his foot got caught in a branch. And so he fell, but he fell properly. Boom. He landed on his back. It was perfect. And how much more does that relate to the spiritual life, right? So if you're praying and you're militating against the diabolic, you're, building a robust prayer life, eventually when you're choosing hardship and you're doing that deliberate self-denial on a consistent basis, you're praying on a consistent basis, you're training on a consistent basis, you're fasting on a consistent basis. When you're making it hard for yourself, when life does get hard, you know how to fall. You're going to immediately revert to your prayer. You're going to immediately revert to training. You're going to do these things in a way that you can properly take that suffering and offer it up. You're living a sacrificial theology, which is so important. to enduring in the faith and growing in the faith and becoming a saint. Learn how to fall. Like a judo practitioner, you must learn the art of falling. That's by doing all of these things tactically, practically, daily, and having that part of your life. It's a lack of structure, a lack of the imposition of order, a lack of fortitude that is plaguing 99% of Catholic men. And that's why so many end up apostatizing, so many end up not getting married because they're doomer spiraling, why so many are still enslaved to lust, why so many are still enslaved to gluttony, etc. The list goes on. That if we can shore up this virtue, we're truly rebuilding the church militant. We're soldiers for Christ. And without fortitude, you cannot be a soldier for Christ. You cannot be on the front lines in battle, fighting for faith, fighting for family, fighting for our Lord without this fundamental virtue. And so if you're a Catholic man that's seeking mentorship or coaching with regard to fitness, nutrition, the growth in virtue, denouncing vice, this is also what I do. I'm going to leave my application form in the link below. I work with serious Catholic men one-to-one. It's not a generic program. So this is you. Absolutely reach out to me. We'll see if we're a fit, and we'll move forward from there, Lord willing. But at the very least, I hope this has been edifying and helpful. And what I ask of you kindly is to like, share, comment, subscribe. And most of all, share this with a brother you think that needs to hear it. Share this with a brother who you think lacks fortitude. And hopefully that helps him. Because that's all this is about. That's all my channel is about helping you men become better, more faithful, virtuous Catholic men. This is the hill that I want to die on. This is the hill that the Lord has me on. So please support in any way that you see fit. And God bless you. Go forth, become saints, be strong, be salty, and Deus Vult.